Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming at you from Film Fanatic headquarters. Hope everyone's doing good on this crazy, chaotic day that we're having with the weather. Could be losing power, so I figured I'd at least do something productive if that happens and make a video. Well, I do them anyway, but figured I'd get them in while they have power. Yeah, Lincolnville Beach, where I live, which is about 3 minutes from my house, is totally washed out. It's kind of it's kind of crazy. I didn't realize how rough it was going to be outside. But anyway, glad I did all of my or I should say, glad I finished up all my Christmas shopping yesterday because it's a little bit nuts. So yeah, I hope everyone's doing good. I went to surprise, surprise, my favorite place in the universe yesterday. I went to Bull Moose Music. I went there to buy some gifts for my family, but you know, couldn't pass up the chance to buy some stuff for myself. So I got some great movies yesterday. A couple of movies I had never seen before. And I don't know, I might sneak in another show. But this show is going to be about this incredible movie. This movie blew me away. And if I have power later, I think I'm going to watch it again. It was so damn good. It came out in 1976. Werewolf Woman. And it was directed by Rino Di Silvestro. He's an Italian director. This is an Italian film. Never seen this film before. They have Apple Moose. I always go to the Bull Moose location in Waterville. They have an amazing movie selection. They have, if you're into like, I mean, they have everything there. They have lots of new releases and things. But if you're into the cult exploitation realm like I am, they have some unbelievable things there that are just so freaking obscure and so underground. So usually whenever I'm there, like I'll buy music and I'll buy some other things usually. Like yesterday I was there doing some Christmas shopping and had some things that I had ordered. But whenever I'm there, and they have a big broad range of stuff there obviously and a pretty good selection. But when it comes to their horror exploitation uh, section, it's for Blu-rays. It's awesome. Like I'm amazed by the things that I can find there, and a lot of the times I get a lot of movies that I've never seen before, and this was one of them. Never heard of this movie. The thing that was kind of cool when I was reading about this movie was that it had a little like blurb or review from Quentin Tarantino. So I guess apparently this movie, Werewolf Woman, from 1976, is one of his favorite movies of all time. And I'm a big Tarantino fan. He's always talked about his formative years and how he became so knowledgeable about films. It's always fascinating listening to him being interviewed because he's literally a walking textbook on films and filmmaking. He knows so much about so many broad ranges of films, but particularly a lot of films that are like, in this world that are, definitely more obscure and a lot of European films. So I saw the review of that on this Blu-ray package, and I was like, okay, cool. This sounds great, and it's definitely a hardcore exploitation film. Usually when I'm there too, I'm pretty picky about stuff I get. I try to get stuff from certain eras, but I also take chances. But I try to lately. I've been when I go there, I look for stuff that's like in the late '60s, '70s, early '80s. That's usually where I go. There's a lot of great films that came out in the '90s that are in this kind of genre, and also what I've seen now is lately. What I've seen lately when I go there, and a lot of movies I've come across, there's a lot of newer horror films that are coming out that are taking a lot of influence from the whole exploitation world. It's pretty wild. I think it's really, really cool. I think on one hand it's kind of funny because there's a lot of great movies, newer films that are kind of influenced by this style. But I like to take a deep dive and I like to trace stuff back and find. I kind of go out of my way a little bit to find the most obscure and interesting movie I can find, just because it's you just never know, and the variety of things that I've gotten is just amazing. Just within the exploitation world alone, the amount of variety and films that are under that umbrella of horror is staggering. Like it's unbelievable, and the amount of variety that I've come across. Everything from thrillers to movies, murder mystery movies, all the giallo films, all of the great slasher films, all the sex exploitation films, even the all the lately I've been getting into the whole kind of Nazi exploitation world. All of these different directors I've been getting turned on to, and the level of diversity is just amazing. Like it's wild. And there's I think within that genre it's so massive in the exploitation world that there's literally, if you're not into the gore and the say the extreme elements of some of the exploitation movies, I think the giallo films are a really great area for those folks who are maybe not don't have maybe a high threshold for violence like say I would, particularly with the slasher films, because the giallo films are so great because they do have horror elements, but they're also more in the guise of films that were kind of influenced by Hitchcock. They have more of a suspense element. There's a lot of beautiful colors. The cinematography is amazing. They have this real art house kind of quality to them. They're really entertaining. They're very pulpy, and they're to some degree they're also kind of character studies. They're mainly about these characters trying to outwit the other person and try to get what they want and manipulate the situation. So there's a lot of films in the genre that don't necessarily have copious amounts of violence and gore, although there are lots of giallo films that have that. I mean, that's where the trademark that was taken from, that was used a lot in, say, 80s slasher films, where you have the guy who is the gloved killer, where they have, the scenes of where the murderer or the slasher in the film has these gloves, and you have lots of shots of him killing people with a blade or some various device, and he's got these gloves on. And then also the lighting typically is a giallo thing, with the lighting is so over the top and just outrageous and amazing. Those are two big things that are very much taken from the giallo films that I feel a lot of the great slasher films were influenced by, that came later for the most part. But this film was, again, a movie I'd never seen before. It stars Anik Borel, Dagmar Lasbander, Felicita Fanny, and Frederick Stanford. And the star of this movie, Anik Borel, is just amazing. Like, the acting of her character and her acting ability is pretty incredible. This film, it was directed by Rino Di Silvestro, who is an Italian director. And again, I had never heard of him as a director before. I haven't seen any of his films. There's a really awesome interview with him where he talks a lot about, how this film came about. And he talks a lot about where he was a writer for a lot of films, and he never used his name as a, he worked in the kind of in the background, and he worked on a lot of films for years and assisted on lots of different films. He also used an alias when he wrote a lot of various films, so he had like a tremendous amount of experience evidently in the industry. And this film, Werewolf Woman, was his very first movie where he wrote it, directed it, and totally, it was conceived, out of his brain, and it was his first movie ever. So I thought that was really interesting. So he was coming from basically kind of becoming, or from a career as being like to a degree, a ghostwriter in films, where he wrote lots of films, lots of Italian films, European horror films, various exploitation movies, but his name was never used. I believe he was probably paid for his work, and he worked in other facets of filmmaking. I believe he worked in like editing, assisted and also as an assistant to the director. Worked in, I think, in the effects departments in various films. But this was his baby. This was his first time venturing out and creating his own product. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And the interview with him is really great, because he's really he's a very, well, he's Italian, so he's like very animated, and he's so emotional about this project. And this film evidently too was a huge success when it came out. And it was kind of the first of its kind. It was the first werewolf movie that was centered on a female character, which I thought was super interesting. You know, one of my favorite, and arguably my favorite werewolf movie of all time, The Howling, is kind of more or less centered on the female werewolf character, where essentially, especially when you get into the other films, they're it's centered on a female character, and that film came out much later, probably like 10 or 12 years after, late 80s. So mid to late 80s, and this came out in 76. So it's pretty amazing when you think of because typically before, obviously it started with the Universal monster, where Wolfman by Lon Chaney, and since then, and even I guess within the last 30 years or so, predominantly most stories and movies about werewolves are about men. American Werewolf in London, even films like Dog Soldiers, Silver Bullet. So this was an interesting take on it, and it also deals a lot with many subjects, which I thought it was really interesting and totally original. It dealt a lot with a woman's trauma, with through like also with sexual repression. It dealt very much with the true life condition of lycanthropy. It dealt with various forms of mental disorders. So it tackles many subjects. It's not like a typical monster movie per se, but it deals with lots of different elements, and it traces it back to the whole idea, the essence or the lore of werewolf. But it's also very much steeped in the to a degree, a lot of reality around women who are dealing with trauma through with various family issues that they've grown through, physical and mental abuse, sexual abuse, and how women kind of deal with trying to live their lives after going through something horrific. And then it also deals with like the real life disease that's called lycanthropy, where people actually have conditions that are prone to a degree of schizophrenia, and have these impulses they can really necessarily control. And it also deals with kind of bipolar elements too. So it really tackles a lot, and so it's super fascinating. I love how it rides. It really tackles lots of subjects, even though it's definitely still at the end of the day very much a monster movie and like a classic werewolf movie. But it has like some weight to it. It has some real depth, I think, to it as a film. That being said, too, it's 100%. It's without a doubt an exploitation movie. I mean, it's so incredibly sleazy. Yeah, it's super sleazy. It's pretty messed up too. There's a couple of scenes in it. There is a one or two rape scenes in the film that are highly disturbing. One in particular that's really rough. But it's still so well made. It's very gory too. There's some horrifically brutal kills in the film, which I was impressed with. And it has, I think it's also got a giallo vibe where there's a lot of interesting turns and directions that the film goes into. I mean, obviously it's Italian, so it obviously is going to take on a giallo. It's going to have a giallo influence, but it has lots of interesting twists and turns to where in the narrative to where I didn't really expect it to be going into those places. I thought that was super interesting and fascinating. The uh, the direction by Di Silvestro is pretty tremendous. I mean, you really get a sense that this guy, is a serious filmmaker in a lot of ways. Like it's beautifully shot, and it's incredibly low budget. He talks a lot about when this film came out. He was obviously trying to get this movie as much distribution and as much attention as he could, but he felt like he was competing at the time with a lot of Hollywood movies that were coming out in the 70s, particularly a lot of American like blockbuster films at the time. And he said that given that they had nothing really to as far as being able to really compete with that market, they still through a lot of you know grassroots operations, they really were able to find an audience. And I thought that was super fascinating. And they really, worked outside of the system, but yet they found an audience, even against, those kinds of tremendous amounts of odds. And again, like I said, I just discovered this movie, and I just discovered this fabulous director, Rino Di Silvestro, this Italian director. And a lot of the films, obviously he worked exclusively, his background, like I said, he was mostly a ghostwriter in a lot of various films, and he worked pretty much exclusively in the whole Italian horror exploitation world. He did movies such as Deported Women, Deported Women of the Special Section, Hannah D, Cleopatra. He did a version of that. He did another film. He was involved with another film or directed another movie called Women in Cell Block 7, which looks just amazing, which is like a women in prison exploitation movie. Bello di Mama, which is another Italian film he did. And I think probably, obviously, Prostitusi Zone, which is a film about prostitutes. Mechon Incast, which is another Italian film that he made. Excuse my Italian pronunciations. Just amazing. So he worked really, exclusively in the whole Italian world. And these other films look just super fascinating. And again, I've never heard of him, but the interview with him, there's like a 20-minute interview with him at the end of the film, which is super interesting and super fascinating. He's so passionate about this film. The transfer of this amazing movie is incredible on Blu-ray. I got this really cheap. I got it for like $15, and the packaging is super awesome. The music, just the whole, all the artwork comes with a big package inside. All this great artwork. Beautiful, beautiful collection. I was totally blown away by this movie when I watched it. The thing that I loved the most about it, like I said earlier in the show, was all of the different elements. It's definitely at its core, it's definitely a horror movie. It's definitely a true, a werewolf movie in its essence and its delivery. But I love that it has so many different facets. A lot of things are dealing, like I said, with mental illness and trauma. Things that in reality are, in our reality are actually real. They're not things of fiction. So, which I thought really gives the story and the main character's whole plight a lot of complexity to the way the whole story unfolds. It's great, and it's got all of the great classic tropes of exploitation. It's really sleazy. It's a super sleazy movie. I didn't realize how sleazy it was going to be, but very much so. It's super dirty. It's super raunchy. It's super low budget, but it's so creative at the same time. Again, you know, I think less is more. It comes back to that whole saying of, you have these directors that are super passionate about what they do, and they might not have the best, say, technical prowess, but they have a lot of passion and they have a lot of focus and love for what they're doing. I think when it's done with a lot of heart and soul, it kind of can transcend that and still make a mark. Obviously, this film did and found an audience, and now there's this great Blu-ray release that is just tremendous. And I believe Severn put this out. But so down the road, I'm definitely going to check out more films by Rino Di Silvestro because I'm hooked. It's a killer movie. One of the most original werewolf movies I've ever seen too. Super entertaining, and it's super gory too. It's incredibly gory and pretty brutal, and it does do away. It's got the classic exploitation tropes, but like the typical scenario of the werewolf thing. Of how the story and slowly evolves, but then particularly around where there are kills, it's not very traditional, and I thought that was cool and interesting. It was definitely giving you something new and different. But again, awesome movie. Totally blown away. If I have power later, I'm probably gonna watch this again. Just so great. Again, brand new discovery. With stumbling upon this amazing underground exploitation film, 1976. It's hard to believe that it came out, almost 50 years ago. It's blows my mind to think too when these films were kind of in their heyday, when these films were being released and being able to go to see films like this at the cinema is just amazing. I miss, as great as things are, I think now, and I think in some ways it's better. It's always a mixed bag when it comes to what the, you know the internet has done to the entertainment industry. But I think overall, it's and technology for that matter. But I think overall, we're in this golden era of where you have all these classics being released for the first time and getting this treatment that is just unbelievable. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of films that I've covered that were that are in part of this exploitation genre that didn't necessarily find an audience or weren't even released theatrically, they're able to probably able to make a profit through their sales now on Blu-ray editions with all these great companies that are doing it. And now you can actually find these movies and find these titles that were lost, forever, or at one point they were believed to be lost forever. So, just amazing. So yeah, Werewolf in London. Werewolf in London. Werewolf Woman, directed by Rino Di Silvestro, 1976. One of the best exploitation movies ever. Please check this out if you get a chance. It's so awesome. All right, this is Jason Dean. Thanks again. If you like this channel, please please like and subscribe. I really appreciate the love, and hopefully we'll have power. And any of my friends and peeps in Maine, I hope you stay safe today and tonight. So we will see you next time. Have a great day. Bye. Peace.